Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about the accumulation factor. And please, if you've not watched the previous video, I'll please ask you to watch because it's definitely going to help you to understand what we are going to do today. Okay, so please, we've talked about the interest accumulation part 1 and then the effective interest, which is going to help you to understand everything here. So please go and watch. Okay, now I have a motivational quote for you today by Eleanor Roosevelt. She says the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Okay, so don't just make it a dream. Okay, just make it a reality. Try to make it a reality, and I promise it's going to be a really lovely journey. Okay, so let's get to why we are here today, the accumulation factor. Right, so what's the accumulation factor? Imagine you've invested, or let's assume you've invested $10 or 10 Ghana cedis at time 5, which is here. How much will you get at time 6? Right, how much is it worth at time 6? Now for me to know how much is worth at time 6, there's what we call the interest rate. We've talked about in our previous video, the interest rate. Right, so the interest rate is definitely going to help me to find the amount of interest. So it's like if you invested an amount and at a certain point in time it accumulated, the additional amount that was the additional amount to the amount you invested, okay, is what is called the amount of interest. Right, so for you to determine the amount of interest, there's another way. We first talk about one in our previous video, and here's another way of finding the amount of interest in a specific time. Okay, so you're ready to find the amount at time 6. You have the amount you invested at time what? At time 5, right? Plus the effective interest rate, which is 15%, right? Times the amount you are investing is the amount of interest at that time, right? Factorizing the amount you invested, it gives you 1 plus I6 times A5, which determines the amount at what? Time 6. Okay, so this is what we call the accumulation factor for time 6. 1 plus I6, okay, for year 6, because it accumulates the investment from time 5 to time 6. Okay, that's why we call it the accumulation factor for time 6. Now mind you, we are not dealing with only time 6. The time can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 or 1,000. Okay, so we have to find the general way. Right, we have to know the general way. Now the general way of accumulating, right, is 1 plus I, it's 1 plus I subscript n. The n determines the year that the effective rate is represented. Okay, so you have to know that one too. And then it's equivalent to this. In our previous video, we talked about the accumulation function and the amount function. Check it out, and I promise you are going to understand it very much. This is the accumulation factor. The top determines what? The amount of interest times the previous amount that you invested. Right, so this is how to find the effective rate of interest. In our previous video, you can check it out too. And then plus 1, multiplying the amount you are investing gives you what we call the accumulated amount at that specific point in time. Okay, so watch our previous video and I promise you are definitely going to understand it. Okay, now let's do some examples. Okay, so imagine an investment is worth 500, right, at time 3, and the effective interest rate in year 1 is 4, right? In year 4 is 8%, and then in year 5 is 10%. What is the value of investment at time 5? So here we are asked to find the amount at time what? 5. Okay, so how do I find the amount at time 5? You have to use the accumulation factor. You have to accumulate the amount from time 3 to time 4, right, and from time 4 to time 5 before you can know the amount or at time 5. So how do you do that? Let's see it here. This is the solution. Always I ask you to solve it on your own, and then you watch the video so that you can understand it. Okay, because when you get it wrong, after watching the video you really understand what you did wrong, and then you will not repeat it again. Okay, so here we invested the amount at what? At time 3, right, which is 500. Now at time 4 we were given a specific interest rate, right, which is 8%, and at time 5 there was a different interest rate which is 10%. Okay, so this is what you do. At time 3 is 500, you accumulate to time 4 using the accumulation factor, right, and then after that you get a new amount at what? Time 4. We want to know the amount at time 5, right, so you accumulate the whole amount here to time 5, right, and that's what is going to give you the amount at time 5. So this is how we do it: the amount at time 5, and then this is the amount at time 3 times the accumulation factor for time 4, accumulation factor for time 5, and that's the same thing as this. So 500 times 1.08 times 1.10, which is 594. Please punch it on your calculator and then find out if that's the correct answer. Okay, now another example, right? So an investment fund is 2000 at time 0. The effective interest rate, okay, in year n is given by this, right? For n being 1, 2, 3 to infinity, calculate the value of the fund at time 3. Determine the accumulation factor from time 0 to time 3 too. Okay, so solve it on your own, and then after that you come back and watch the video and see whether what you did was right or wrong. Okay, so this is the solution. One, you have to find the amount at time 3. So you just multiply the amount you invested times the accumulation factors. Okay, and then after these are the interest rates. So the interest rates are going to help you to find the accumulation factors, and that's what we did here. Okay, so A3 equals 2000 times the accumulation factor for time 1, the accumulation factor for time 2, and for time 3. Okay, and that's going to help us to get the amount at time 3, which is this, right? Now step 4, you have to find the accumulation factor. You have to use the accumulation factor. In our previous video, here we are using the amount, right? You are using the amount function, which is time 3 over the amount function that you invested, right? And that's this. Okay, it's the same as multiplying the accumulation factors. Okay, so the accumulation factor is what? This, just multiplying all the accumulation factors, right? Is the same as the amount function at time 3 divided by the amount function at time 0, which is the amount you invested. Okay, so pay attention to that. Okay, and then so what did we learn today? In conclusion, we learned that the accumulation factor is what? 1 plus I exponent n, right? And it lets us move forward from one step in time. Okay, and then to accumulate across multiple years, multiple success accumulation factors. Okay, and then with constant IN, it reduced to compound interest. We will talk about compound interest in our next video, so stay tuned, and then you will really understand what we will talk about in the next videos. But please watch the previous videos to understand this topic really well. Okay, so at the end, you know the accumulation factor, you know how to accumulate, right, which is multiplying the amount you are investing by the accumulation factors at each time. Okay, and then if the interest is the same for time 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5, we say is the compound interest. We will talk about it in our next videos. Thank you.